Good morning and welcome to our weekly roundup with Kenny Hodgins. And this week we've got Kaylee Harden. I'm Archer Siren. We're going through an exciting week of football. We'll jump right into the quick hits because there's a lot to talk about this week. One of our surprises internally, Arleta visited Monroe, and the defending East Valley League champions came out on top 13-3. Canoga Park. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to throw in their defense. Arleta's defense gets better every week, so you got to keep the defending champs in the mix.
They have been, and they've been showing that defense is kind of what they're going to lean on this year. Canoga Park has kept their little engine that could season going. They ran over San Fernando 50-20, and they've got a couple people we're going to talk about when we get down to the players of the week. Grant looks like they're starting to right the ship and not bounce back and forth. They defeated Chavez 28-20. Cleveland had a hard one. They drove out to LA Harbor College to face Carson and came away losing 55-12. That was a game, whereas they were tweeting throughout, there seemed to be a lot of people banged up throughout.
Yeah, short week, injuries kind of got the best of them. That final score is not indicative of how good that team is. It was just it was tough to go on the road like we haven't played Palisades six days earlier. So
yep. And then Holly traveled to North Hollywood in their rivalry match that's been standing for a long time. And it was a physical affair. That finished 54-7 for North Hollywood. And get into a little bit of the details on that one a little later on.
Jalen Burke goes off again.
Yeah, and that's going to be kind of the question for the Valley, East Valley, is how do they stop Jalen Burke when they're playing North Hollywood? And even when you do stop them, what are you going to do about Ronnie Gibson right behind? And it was their 1-2 punch that was basically what put away Arleta last week. And Valley Mission League, Panorama went into Selmar and capitalized on their chances and walked out with a win 26-12.
Big bounce back win for the Pythons after coming up short on the short end of the stick last week against Canoga. Got themselves back in the title race with a quality performance on the road.
Yeah. And, talking to bounce back, Verdugo Hills went into Van Nuys, and after a disappointing loss previously, they came out on top 24-14.
I mean, picking up their first win of the year. Now it's just time to see if they can keep it going.
Yeah. And Birmingham went on the road coming out of their bye and picked up their first win of the year, 28-14 over Wainimi.
Big win for Birmingham. Gets them in the win column before they head in the league, and that's exactly what you wanted to see them do.
A healthy Birmingham is the best Birmingham because their team, even with missing players, they looked good. They just didn't have enough guys.
And that really kind of is the focal point for them. We've established here a couple times how they went 0-5 last year and then ran the league when it started. And being healthy now, picking up this first win, who is going to look at them and say, well, maybe we can knock off Birmingham? If you don't know, you're probably not.
Mm-hmm. It's just a great indicator of what could be to come for them. Like I said, Dave, kudos to them as the Kings of the City. They went out and they scheduled tough games in their non-league, and they got kicked around a little bit because, they were banged up, kind of figuring some things out because lost some important key guys from last season. But to see them go on the road to Wainimi and kind of, lay the smack down on them a bit, because the final score is not even an indication of how far apart that game was or how close that game was. Wainimi got a couple of touchdowns. One of the touchdowns was like should have been a pick, and somehow it went through the kid's hands and landed in the kid's arms in the end zone. But Birmingham really went out there and laid the wood to them. So it was the kind of game you wanted to see. It was the kind of game where you could see them making a statement like, okay, all right, now the fun begins. You guys might have thought because we had a big offer on our record that you guys have a chance this year. We're going to see now.
And that also attests to like how much the kids trust their coaching staff to be able to continuously go out there and lose, but then know that you're still a top dog contender.
Mm-hmm.
It's confidence.
Oh, yeah.
And it kind of speaks the same when you look at the two Southern Section games we were keeping an eye on this week. St. Genevieve went into Campbell Hall, and Campbell Hall did what they've done all season. They came out 23-6, and don't look now, but Campbell Hall 6-0.
Mm-hmm. And it was a balanced performance by them as well. They played well on both, and pretty much in all phases of the game. So it just kind of shows you that we kind of questioned how good they were because they played a struggling Arleta team. They beat up Poly at the beginning of the year. And we're like, okay, how good are they? That haven't really played anybody who would knock your socks off. But now they're going to get a chance to once they get in the league now, when you see their schedule coming up. So, it was exactly what you wanted to kind of see out of Campbell Hall. So we'll see what they do going forward. It spells big things for them in terms of being able to compete with teams in the Southern Section. Because if you go through the first part of your schedule and you beat up all the teams that we expected you to beat up, and then you play a Southern Section team in St. John's, and listen, St. John's hasn't had the best start to the year, but there are no pushovers. That Will Parra, their star player, he usually puts up big numbers, and they pretty much stymied and stifled him the whole game. So a good win for Campbell Hall.
And the final Southern Section game we were kind of keeping an eye on, Calabasas went into Crescenta Valley and took a tight first half that was 1 point and turned it into a blowout in the third quarter. They walked away 57-20.
When you watch Calabasas athletes,
is anyone playing defense in that game?
Listen, when you watch Calabasas, when you see them up close, it's athletes, and more athletes. They just have different kids on the field. And kudos to them for kind of turning that thing around quick, because it wasn't that way a couple of years ago. They actually had they struggled with what a lot of schools have struggled with in terms of like kids just kind of piecing out and going somewhere else or going to Chaminade. They lost kids to Chaminade. They lost kids who went out into the other part of LA City to go play. But they've done a good job of kind of rebuilding that thing on the fly really quickly. And they've got a 1-2 punch in those wide receivers and Butler and McGee that on any given week, one of them's going to burn you for 200 yards in the air. And we're not even talking about that monster on defense, that Pico Jr. So, yeah, they're a fun team to watch.
And that's what kind of surprises me a little bit is Butler didn't play in the half. And somehow, CV held Pico Jr. under wraps for the first half. I looked at the score and I was like, okay, this is going to be a bit of a dogfight. And then Butler takes a handoff to start the second half and goes 52 yards. And here we go. The interesting thing is that was the only score for most of the third.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the last 5 minutes, they went boom, boom. And through the first couple minutes of the fourth, they scored just kind of back to back to back. And it was backbreaking. And, Pico Jr. had a couple sacks that forced fumbles. There was an interception. There were 2 interceptions, one by a big D lineman. He took it in for 20 yards. So it really was a point of when Calabasas started clicking in the second half, they ran away.
Oh, yeah.
And with Crescenta Valley, they've got their league schedule set up, and I talked to coach after the game, and he said that coming out of a tough game like this, knowing that they played Calabasas tight for almost 3 full quarters is something they can take forward and grow on. He kind of was lamenting the fact that they had 2 field goals in the first half that could have been touchdowns. The first one probably should have been. They got a bit of a blessing on a punt on their first possession where it hit Calabasas up man in the foot. And he wasn't not paying attention, but it just kind of bounced right into him. And it popped him on the foot, and CV pounced. They got the ball back, drove into the 10, and were stopped. And now, okay, they're going to kick a field goal, open the game, good. Running into the kicker. They got a 1st and goal. And the Calabasas D just clamped and forced the field goal. As much as you look at it as, it's a missed opportunity, that Calabasas defense did what they really wanted to do, and they held them to a field goal. And then at the end of the half, it was 14-10 Calabasas, and here comes CV marching the field, trying to get that score before halftime. And again, they were inside the 10. If one play went out of bounds, if there was a little more time on the clock, maybe they could have got a touchdown. But they took the field goal, and that's a victory kind of in their eyes for the half of, we could have had more. We're down 1 point.
Yeah.
And come out and fight again in the next half.
Yeah.
But they've got Burroughs next week. So this is something they can build on, take the positives and go into league and hope that you can do something against a really tough Burroughs team. And the next one we'll touch on was a dogfight for the ages. We touched on the score, 28-20, Grant over Chavez. McKenny, you were there, and you watched these two just slug it out for 4 quarters.
Listen, when you get into league play, no matter what league it is, whether it's East, West, Valley, Mission, these teams know each other. They know what to expect. And these games are going to be, unless there's just a gulf in talent, if you've got competitive teams, anything can happen. And this game was a great example. So coming into the game, there were 2 things attached to these 2 teams. Chavez is youthful, exuberant, but inexperienced. And Grant has just been Jekyll and Hyde all year. They had a hot game and a half to start the year. And from the second half, whatever happened to them in that second half of that Cleveland game in week 1, they just weren't able to shake that monkey off their back going into this week. So you wanted to see which one of these teams that have been struggling could kind of put something together and kind of change their trajectory going into the league. So Grant started the game smooth offensively early. The one thing you know about Grant, in my opinion, and I know Jalen Burke's going to have something to say about it. I know some of the other kids in the league are going to have something to say about it, but Grant, to me, is the best set of skill players in the league in terms of what they can do with their runners, what they can do with their passing game. That quarterback is a sophomore, but I know Jalen Burke and Ronnie Gibson are a great combination, but to me, what Grant can do to you is, if the run game's not working, they can throw it. If they can't throw it, they've got 2 runners who can break or who can pop one for you. So you know what you're going to get from them offensively if they can play consistently. And they did a good job. They were mixing the run with the pass. Honestly, they went for the throat right off the bat because they had an onside kick to start the game. I couldn't even get my camera set up. I thought I had time, and they went onside kick right out of the gate, got it, went right down the field, took a 7-0 lead, and kind of gave you the indication like they might be ready to run Chavez out of the building. But what we learned about Chavez is no one's running this team out of the building because they're going to kick your ass the entire game. Like, they're a team, they'll never get out of their game plan. They are well coached, even though they're a small outfit. They're one-dimensional, like I've been saying all week about this team. They're a one-dimensional team, and their one dimension is butt kicking. Like, they're going to come at you for 4 quarters. They know who they are. They know what they want to do. And it's a matter of, are you going to be able to stop it? They never got out of what they wanted to do. Their defense kind of hung tough. They slowed down Woodard, who they never really let him get off at any point in the game. They were really keyed on him in terms of, we're not letting him break one to the outside. We're not, they're sound in the way they tackle. And they did a really good job of kind of corralling that run game. Even with the pass game, they blitzed a lot. Hovsepian did a good job of just kind of holding his water, taking what they would give him. He'd roll out of the pocket away from the pressure. He'd hit receivers in stride. And it was nip and tuck. No one was really running away with the game, but it was just a slugfest, back and forth, both teams just absorbing each other's shots. And because Grant can move the ball a little easier, they were able to build a lead and play from the front. The game was 20-6 going into the fourth quarter. And then Chavez showed you the grit and mettle you want to see from a team. Like, it would have been very easy 2 scores down when they don't even attempt to throw the ball. They threw the ball like one time, which didn't make a lot of sense to me because the one time they threw the ball, the kid made a spectacular catch. And I'm like, well, coach, I think you should do that a little bit more. Maybe, mix it up a little bit. But I digress. 20-6 in the fourth quarter. Most teams will be like, well, even if that's not our bag, we gotta start throwing the ball. Nope, not them, not Chavez. We're gonna still run the ball because the way they figure, we've been punching you in the face for 3 quarters. Let's see if you still want to tackle. And guess what? Grant was still there. They were game. But when you get in the fourth quarter and all of a sudden now I'm seeing your guys start getting off the ground slow, okay, we're going to just run the ball with more tempo, and we're going to just keep coming right at you. Let's see if you guys want to tackle. And they got the game to 20-13. I think it was like 5 minutes to go. You knew they needed to get a stop. And Jaquel Woodard, who hadn't had a bad game, but not a great game, did what we've seen a little bit from Grant when you talk about shooting yourself in the foot. It's 20-13. We just got to keep running the ball. We got to keep moving. We got to run the clock. And he fumbled. He got stripped. Great play by the Chavez defender. Gives up the ball. Chavez gets the ball back. And what do? Another 3.5 minute grinding straight at you, running the ball down the field. Get down. Had to convert a 4th and short. Chains came into play with Grant again. They can't seem to get away from controversial plays in fourth down situations. Once again, it kind of goes against them. But this time, I think it was a little less controversial. It was 4th and short. Chavez got the 6 inches they needed. They go down and they score the game. They tie things up at 20 or about 2 minutes to go. What ensues after that is the craziest 12 seconds you will ever see in a football game in your life. Keeping with the theme of Upman having a tough week, ensuing kickoff, Chavez's kicker kicks the ball right at the Upman of Grant. I do not know what this young man was looking at, but the ball hits him directly in the face like something out of Little Giants and ricochets back towards Chavez, works out like an onside kick. Now they've got the ball with under 2 minutes to go with a chance to go down and salt the game away. They get a false start, 1st and 15, and then promptly fumble the quarterback to running back exchange, put the ball on the ground, goes right to a Grant player. They get it right back. So without any time even really going off the clock, we've had 2 change of possessions. And then the very next play, that's when they go Hovsepian to Kazakh Anderson, makes 2 guys miss, and he's coming right towards me for the game-winning score. They go up 28-20. And you would think backbreak it. And he got the 2-point conversion because he's He's a savage. You throw a fade to the back of the end zone, he's going to catch it. So they're up 28-20. You're thinking the game's over, right? It's over. 90 seconds to go. They don't even throw the ball. Let's just pack it up and go. No. Chavez comes right back. 3 big runs. They're back inside the 15 of Grant without having thrown the ball once. They just keep running it at you, and you're like, is Grant going to do it again? Like, are they inventing another way to lose a game? But because of the clock kind of played against Chavez in that scenario, they had to throw the ball the last couple of plays, and they just couldn't find a completion to kind of keep the game going, and that's how Grant got out of there with a win. So I will say this. My takeaways coming out of that is Chavez is going to continue to build on their identity. Like we've talked about on this podcast before, they are purposely playing a bunch of 10th graders at the varsity level. These kids don't know what the hell they're doing half the time. Poor Nunez, if you hear his voice after games, he doesn't have one anymore because he spends the entire time yelling at kids to get lined up the right way, or making sure that trying to get the call into the quarterback because the play is supposed to be going one direction and the guys are lined up on the wrong side. They don't even know what they're doing yet, and they are tough as nails. So they're going to continue to build an identity, even though they're one-dimensional, and they're going to be, to me, the gatekeeper of who wins this league. Because the thing that you're going to get from Chavez that you know that you're going to get is a fight. So North Hollywood and Grant, North Hollywood and Monroe, who they're going to see after their bye, they're going to have to know what Grant found out today. You're not going to just get a W against them because they're going to play their game. They're going to force you into a fight. And like Coach Franco Cecily said after the game, they test your mettle. And for Grant, it was a complete performance. It was not perfect. They made mistakes. Like I said, that poor up man, that was probably a tough day of film for him when they got to that portion of the game. Because it'd be different if the way the ball hit him, like he had turned to go sprint. He wasn't. He was looking at the ball and somehow it ricocheted off his face. That's going to be between him and his special teams coach to kind of figure out what went wrong there. And that fumble from Woodard really made things harder than it needed to be for them going down the stretch. So it wasn't a perfect performance. There's things they got to clean up. But to me, I feel like it was a galvanizing team win. Like they found out some things about themselves in this game because Chavez punched them in the face repeatedly. And their kids, there were points in the game where they were damn near a fifth guy having to jump on top of a ball carrier to get him to the ground because Chavez just refused to not get their 3 yards in a cloud of dust every time they touched the ball. They went for their pound of flesh every chance they had, and which is what kind of makes them fun. So, if you like seeing free-flowing football all over the place and passing and willy-nilly, Chavez might not be for you. For me, who was a guy like me who was a box safety, who my favorite thing in the world was to come up and hit somebody in the face. Oh, I love watching them play. That's my kind of football. So it's going to be great to see how they progress over the course of the next couple of years when they get some more athletes in that program and these 10th graders know what the hell they're doing next year. But for this year, they're going to be a problem to deal with because they're not going to lay down for anybody. So that's my takeaway from that game.
And I don't want to get too far ahead, but we're talking about the Monroe seniors on a revenge tour.
Oh,
imagine these kids,
these guys
in
2 years, they're gonna bully everybody. They're going to eat your soul. If Rodrigo Nunez is one of those coaches that, as I'm talking to him in the back of my head, I'm thinking, boy, I really hope some of these other programs don't figure out what he's doing here and try to steal him away. Even though he is invested in what they're doing, I don't see that guy leaving. I think he's invested in what he's doing and he thinks he can really build something great there. But he has instilled a toughness. And first of all, if you meet the guy, you shake his hand. He's made out of granite, this guy. He's ridiculous. But it's one of those things where sometimes you see a team when they take the field, I remember when they played Kennedy, these kids were walking past Kennedy like, yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, I don't look so tough. Like they're looking at Kennedy as they're walking by him, sizing him up like, okay, we'll see what you got today. And they hung in there with them too. And, a bad third quarter where they turned the ball over and then Kennedy kind of took it to him a little bit. But they're not scared of anybody they line up across, which is the first part of it when you're a team that may not have the skill that other teams have. Are you willing to go out there and just make it ugly? And not everybody's going to want to play like that. Grant had to figure it out. Because you can tell it was a clash of styles in terms of like, you've seen Grant. Those kids want to get out and play fast. Cesar Anderson ain't trying to come up and tackle nobody 15 times a game. That's not how he gonna make his money. I don't want to do that. Like they've got a few kids on Grant that want to play that way, but that's a hard way to play for 48 minutes of having to stand there and just bang. Listen, like I said, I like it. Most kids ain't gonna want to play a team like that. But kudos to Grant. They found out something about themselves, and they found that they got the heart. So we'll see if they can take that going forward. Because, like I said, there's been up and down. Maybe this is a game where they kind of put it all together, and now they play this way the rest of the league slate.
Yeah. I'm gonna wrap it with one more point. Grant has their smash mouth kid they get the ball to. And that's his calling card. That's his bread and butter. You give the ball to Hovo Tandretian, and he will pound it in the middle. He will punch you in the face. This kid, that's what he lives for.
Oh, yeah. And he showed it. So, like I said, they just have to continue to build on playing consistently and having less of the ugly stuff, because that's a football game. You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to do some ugly stuff. You're going to do some great stuff. If they can just figure out how to minimize the mistakes and minimize the bonehead things, they are so talented. They could win the league. They could win their skill guys. They could win a city championship this year. That's how much I believe in what they have in their skill package. It's just, you got to stay out of your own way, So we'll see if they can do that going forward, because it's all there for
them. Yeah. And next on our roundup, like you said, Panorama went into Silmar and came away with a 2-score win. It was 26-12. But this is another game that was 1 point at halftime. It was 13-12. And Panorama had it, but they took advantage of their opportunities in the second half. The first half, though, that was kind of a coming out party for the Mims twins. You got Jason Gile, and they had 3 turnovers. And these kids were all over the place. Jace had 2 forced fumbles, and he recovered both of them and took one of them to the house. And it was similar to facing, I guess, a Chavez team, because Panorama, all they do is run the ball. They're going to run the ball. They only had 2 pass attempts all game. And the first pass attempt was intercepted by Gile. And, Panorama kept coming. And then, boom, they broke the big play. And they had the 60-yard rush by Pacheco. And he was chased down and taken down. But he ended up putting it in from 2 yards. And coach told me after the game, he was like, Justin Pacheco is their workhorse. He's a senior. He's been on their program for 4 years. And he had their 3 touchdowns on the ground. And just give him the ball and let him go. And that was what they did. And Silmar had their opportunities. They fought hard. They were in the trenches. And the two that bit them. They had I think it was like a 54-yard touchdown that was called back because the slot receiver was not on the line. And it kind of, speaks to some of the youth that is on that Silmar team. You always check in with the official on the sideline. You look to him. Am I good? Am I lined up? Am I where I'm supposed to be? And boom. They were trying to get this kid's attention before the snap. Hey, check with the official. Where are you? Check with the official. I guess he was just too locked in on I got to run the play. And 54-yard touchdown call back. And then late in the game, that would have actually tied the game if that touchdown stood. It would have been 19 apiece, something like that. And then end of the game, last 4 minutes, Silmar's driving again. They get to the goal line and second down. They hand off the ball. Kid gets met at the line of scrimmage, and he's now fighting, trying to push over the goal line, and loses the ball. Again, after the game, coach is like, "That's a learning moment," because when he goes in the locker room, he's going to tell him, "Hey, that was second down. Go down. We got 2 more tries. You're at the goal line. You don't need the extra 6 inches. Go down." Because then we'll punch it in on third down. If we don't punch it on there, we'll try again on fourth down. And hey, they'll take it. They'll learn from it. Kind of looking ahead, Silmar's got some tough schedule coming up, but this is where you learn. This is where you build your mettle. I'm gonna go back to the Mims twins real quick. They excite me. These boys excite me. They're juniors and they're showing signs of leadership to the point where next year, when they're seniors, and they've already been taking ownership of this program and buying into the coach and the staff, and now they come in as the seniors, and this is their team. How is it going to grow? I try not to get too far ahead of myself, but every time I see sophomores like at Chavez, juniors like at Silmar, and a couple of these other schools like at Cleveland, I get excited for what's to come because these kids are only going to get better.
And just a quick note, good losses, right? It's no one wants to hang their hat on any moral victories, but it's still all to play for them. And if you're the coaching staff, you go in and you go on this tape, and if you can see more plus plays than minus plays, and they're just things like, hey, we got to clean that up. Mentally, you got to be locked in and understand your position, and so you don't have a 54-yarder get called back on you. Like, there are things that you can clean up that will have you come out of this week feeling like we gave this one away, as opposed to they came in and they just handed us our behinds. So, they're going to be okay. Like I said, this is still a team in the Valley Mission that you're still going to have to deal with. Kennedy's going to have to deal with it. And it's going to be a tough game going against these twins. And like you said, as they continue to kind of progress, it's going to be interesting to see what they turn into. Maybe this time next year, we're talking about them being the team to beat in the Valley Mission, but it's going to be fun. And we'll be there for the ride. So
yeah, and you brought up their pending matchup with Kennedy in a couple of weeks. And Kennedy was our game of the week. They filled an unfortunate hole left by Reseda and not having enough bodies. They filled the hole. They talked to Chatsworth, and Chatsworth was game, and that was our game of the week. Kennedy and Chatsworth, and Kaylee was there for it. So we're going to let her take it away and regale us with Battle in the a battle in the Dust Bowl.
Yeah, Dust Bowl for certain. I was excited about this game because they had equal records going into it, and I had never seen either of these teams play before. So, and also their schedules are very different. They don't face in the beginning of the season, they weren't facing the same schools, so it was interesting to try to compare the two. But once I got to the game, I noticed that, well, first of all, Kennedy their sideline was much deeper than Chatsworth's was. So I kind of in the beginning, I was kind of thinking like which way the game was going to lean. That is what ended up happening, but it was a good fight the whole time. It was that Kennedy did not take that game away easily, and that's for sure. Like there's a lot of work to be put in. Kennedy scored first, but one thing that I noticed that they did is even on plays where they could have gone for it and they could have ran the ball into the end zone or they could have tried to pass the ball into the end zone, they played it safe and they were kicking field goals. This happened twice through the game and it actually put them up 6 points, which was like an entire score for them. They ended up winning the game by, I think, 2 full scores. They won by 14 points and they scored a 2-point conversion on one of their touchdowns. So that was 2 field goals that they scored. They secured that cushion with those field goals, which is better than, incomplete passing and turning the ball over. So that was interesting to see and really smart on their part. After the first quarter, I think the score ended with that 3-0. That was the field goal that was scored by Kennedy. It was the only score in the first quarter. Second quarter, though, Kennedy came out strong. They ended the first quarter on the 2-yard line, so they came back in the second quarter and just scored immediately. They got an extra point. There were some incomplete passes on Kennedy's part. I will say that both teams relied very heavily on their run game in this game. There were many incomplete passes on the goal line, which was frustrating to see because it feels so close. But the kickoffs from Chatsworth to Kennedy were very shallow, and that helped Kennedy not have to work their way down the field as much as Chatsworth did on their possessions. They just didn't have as much ground to cover. I think there was 2 possessions where they started the ball like on the 50-yard line. So that was in Kennedy's favor for sure. Near the end of the game, I mean, the second quarter, at halftime, it's still a pretty close game. You got 13-6. Kennedy's still up. At that point, they had scored both teams had scored their first touchdowns. The first touchdown on Chatsworth's side was by Isaiah Ramo, which, I mean, no surprise there. He held the ball basically every single snap. And then I think it was number 11, who I believe is a sophomore for Kennedy. He scored Kennedy's first touchdown, which I think was a surprise to them because he's a young player. But the second half was even more exciting. This is when the dust really started to get kicked up. The camera was getting grainy. The kids supposedly were getting rough in the dust with each other, according to the coaches, but I cannot confirm nor deny those accusations. But there was a play that really sealed the deal in this game in the third quarter. There was a point where Isaiah Ramo dropped the ball. He had a fumble. It was picked up by 34 Gabriel Argett.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Gabriel Argett for Kennedy. Picked it up, ran it for like a 50-yard touchdown. After that, I think that the deficit was just too hard for Chatsworth to run back from. So the game remained a 2-score game the rest of the time. But in the fourth quarter, they were pushing it. The tempo was up. Both of these teams were trying. I mean, I feel like Kennedy was really just trying to build that cushion. And I feel like Chatsworth was obviously trying to come back. And I thought that they had it in them. They were getting into the red zone. They were close every time. And unfortunately, it just came to a point of incomplete passes on the goal line again, turnovers on downs. And at the end of the game, I think there was like 30 seconds left and the score was 13-27. And Chatsworth wasn't coming back at that point. But it was a good fight, really good run game by both teams, really great defense by both teams. The coordination was amazing. They communicated well. I didn't get to spend too much time on the Chatsworth sideline, but as far as coaching goes on the Kennedy sideline, there wasn't a ton of like negative yelling. The coaches were super encouraging. They had a really deep coaching staff, so it felt like every single player that came off the field was getting individualized criticism and attention from their coaches, and they were taking that back on the field and just getting visibly better play-by-play, which is exciting to see because there's learning going on right in front of your eyes.
So to piggyback a little bit on what she's talking about, Steven Garcia. Now, this is going to sound crazy. He might be the key to them winning the Valley Mission this year, that kicker. Because from what I've seen, he's the one kicker in that league that, and they're the one team that can do that. Like Haley said, first half, you get stuck a little bit. Instead of trying to go for it on fourth down, if you got a kid that can make a 25-yarder, a 30-yarder, a 35-yarder, and just put 3 on the board, that could be the difference, right? Those two field goals make the game feel completely different in the fourth quarter, right? 27-13 feels a whole heck of a lot different than 21-13 when Isaiah Ramo at any point can pop one and tie the game. The next thing you know, you find yourself in a Grant Chavez situation where you're like, hold on, we've outplayed them this entire game. How the hell are we tied? If you can kind of hit 2 field goals, or if Cassidy's got that in his back pocket to where I don't have to take a chance, I can kick the ball. Also, kid's got a leg on him. He is one of the few kickers you see around that can consistently hit one out the back of the end zone, which worked for them because that will help them when they play Granada. Because one of Dijon Stanley's specialties is, I'm going to take this ball on the 5 and I'm going to take it 95 yards. They took the ball out of his hands when they played Granada, because they have a kicker who can put the ball out the back of the end zone and make you start from the 20. Something like that could be the difference when they play teams like Canoga and Panorama, when you expect it's going to be a gritty game, it's going to be a tough fight, and you might be looking at a 15-10 game, and it's because your kicker came in and kicked 3 field goals. So he might be the key to them winning that league.
Well, and in stark contrast, there were several kicks that just weren't even making it past the halfway point of the field when they were doing changes of possession. So that definitely also worked in Kennedy's favor, because they were starting off by only having to do half the work on some of their possessions. They only had to get halfway there. So,
and another theme that has been a theme of Chatsworth season is not being able to finish drives. Ramo does the work, gets them in a position to really step on a team's throat and really put them in a position to win, and they just don't finish drives, whether it be a penalty that puts them behind the chains, or they miss a receiver, or they just, whatever it is, they've had a hell of a time just finishing drives and putting themselves in position to beat the better teams. It won't cost you when you're playing lesser competition, but if you're playing the Kennedys of the world, if you're playing a Heritage Christian, if you're playing some of these tougher teams, it's going to kill you when you don't finish. When you get an opportunity to put points on the board and you don't do it, that's the difference between whether you are 2-3 or 4-1 or 3-2. So,
yeah, and it's one thing to be one-dimensional, and we've talked about a few teams that are one-dimensional. like we'll go in depth a little more, but North Hollywood, fairly one-dimensional. They focus on the run. Chavez, one-dimensional. Panorama, one-dimensional. But the difference with them being a team that has one offensive dimension is they don't have one offensive weapon. If it's not Ramo, I haven't seen anyone else do anything for Chatsworth.
There was one other guy, I think it was I want to say it was number 6, but there was at one point, because I was honestly shocked, because every single snap, number 20, Isaiah's running the ball down the field with 4 guys hanging out around his neck, insane. So at a certain point, I'm like, this kid can't do this forever. He can't do this for 3 hours straight. There's no way. And they did have some backup for him, who is also making great runs. Like they definitely have a couple guys that are able to get the ball down the field. My concern would be if one of those guys gets hurt, and I don't want to say when, because I don't want to put that on anyone's football career, but if one of those kids were to get hurt, the wind's going to be knocked out of them. I don't think that they have anything left in their arsenal to play another team.
But it's so frustrating, because if you watch them, right, obviously they don't have as many kids as Kennedy does. But Kayla, you saw them up close. They got some monstrous looking kids.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
And you would see that, and you would say, like, okay, they're going to come in here and bully. And in a lot of regards, they do. That's their offense. Isaiah Ramo, that O-line is going to grind you. He's going to get outside. They're going to toss left. They're going to toss right. And he's going to run through 3 or 4 guys. But what's frustrating is I've seen that quarterback play a little bit. He can play. Like, we're not talking about like a kid who's a freshman who can't, like, okay, you're just out there to hand it to Ramo because we don't trust you to do anything else. You see him at times, and I saw him against the Heritage Christian. He had opportunities. He could get outside the pocket. He can throw the ball down the field. I don't know if it's just they're kind of stubborn and like that's not our identity, so we're just gonna give it to Ramo 45 times a game. But they've got the ability. They've got players who can do other things. They got to get out of that stodgy sort of like, okay, this is how we're going to win a game, so we're only going to do it this way. Because I think Kaylee makes a great point. You're going to wear him down at some point. You need to take some carries off of this kid because nobody can do that for an entire season. The kid's name escapes me from that our leader running back last year. He ran for 2,200 yards, but he missed a couple of games because he got run into the ground at one point and he got banged up and he couldn't play a couple of games. So which is even more insane, the fact that he had 2,200 yards and he only played 10 of their games. He missed a few of them because God knows what his numbers would have been and he played all of them. But that's the risk you run. If you run your backs into the ground, for instance, Kennedy really has a 2-back set. Gore Abrahamian would probably tell you he could run as many times in a game as Ramo could, because that kid's an animal too. He cornered me one time going around the corner and was telling me, "No, I'm the best back." I'm like, anyway. But they balance it with our guy, who probably is better on defense for Kennedy than he is as a runner. But they split those carries, so one guy is just not just constantly just pounding away the entire game. They try to bounce it off, like Kaylee said. Madrigon, I think is his name, the number 11. Even he gets some touches because you can't. If you want to win, you have to take some of the pressure off of your bell cow. You just have to, because they're going to wear down. And I feel like at times when you watch Ramo, he's not tired, but mentally you can tell at times he gets a little frustrated at the idea, like, okay, if it's not on me, who the hell else around here is going to make a play?
Or when there's like a holding penalty, like he's made 3 first downs in a row, and then all of a sudden there's a holding penalty by somebody else. That's got to be frustrating.
The thing about them that I am like this when I watch them is I cannot tell you how many times this year I have watched a touchdown come off the board, a first down come off the board, or a big play come off the board because there was a holding penalty away from the play, or there was something happen away from the play that didn't even need to happen. That's just a discipline thing that kills them, kills drives, kills scoring the chances. And it's like they've got to clean this up. They're going into league. They will go 0-5 if they continue to make dumb mistakes like they did in the first half. And they're better than that. Like, you see these kids when they walk out there, you're like, oh, they're gonna win. Just from looking at Chatsworth when they show up. When they get off the bus, they look better than the other team. Ramo's calves are the size of a regular human being's head.
Most of these kids, I'm not super short. Most of these kids, when I talk to them, I'm like eye level with them. This kid was up here. I was like, oh my goodness,
huge. I'm thinking about me in high school, mind you. Like I said, I was a box safety. When I was at my fighting weight, I was 5'9", 220. I wouldn't have wanted to hit that kid because he's built out of granite. He is huge, and he's coming at you, and she's not lying. Every play for Chatsworth goes the same way. He does not go down until the fourth guy comes. Like, nobody tackles him on the first hit. He has some, like, if there was a way to kind of track his yards after contact, it would be astronomical because the first guy is just the appetizer. He's going to run through that guy.
It's insane. Like, three guys will come on him and he's 10 yards away from the end zone and he still is slow motion moving across the goal line.
Oh yeah.
It's like watching, when you watch someone run through water, that's what it looks like.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it comes back to, the same thing again. Is like, if they got to get him help, and they've got other people who've carried the ball, but you've got to have a way for the defense to not key on Ramo every single time he's on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And if your O-line is strong enough to create a path for him to make these runs, then the O-line is strong enough to support the quarterback long enough to get a pass in. They gotta just complete the passes that they were making, because the ones that they were going for, they were good passes and they were good plays, but they just can't connect.
Yeah, and it's just a matter of really focusing and really trying to create that balance in their offense. Because
maybe it was the dust in the air that made it hard to catch the ball. I don't know.
Maybe. But the bottom line is they're not playing to the level of the talent that they're putting on the field. They're just not. Like, that O-line, I wish I could shrink them down to 10-year-olds and put them on my son's team because we need it. You see them come in and it's and you watch them, they're road graders up front on both sides of the ball, on the defensive side of the ball too. You're not just going to run it up on them. They can play in the trenches. It's just a matter of, can they find that balance that's going to help them be better equipped to beat better teams. When you're playing against teams that Ramo can just run over, of course, you're going to be fine. But if you're playing Kennedy and you don't have a way to kind of force their coaching staff, a really good coaching staff, to have to make adjustments to what you're doing, it makes the road to hoe way too tough.
Yeah. And I'm gonna switch gears a little bit here, but we're gonna go from one bell cow in Ramo to another bell cow. I'm gonna jump into our player of the week. This one, man, when I saw Canoga against Village Christian, gosh, it was 3 weeks ago now. The fight was clear that this team is going to come and they're going to battle and battle and battle, because they didn't have the numbers, but they had the heart. And you couldn't really see it in the game, that game, but you've seen it since. And Corey Rule went off. 29 carries, 403 yards, and 5 touchdowns. I mean, he was over 200 yards at halftime.
That's one of those games. I call it the grandpa in the corner game. That's the game that when he's a grandpa, he's going to look at and he's going to like, y'all don't even understand what I was when I was in high school. Y'all have no clue how good I was. I was killing people. They couldn't tackle me. I was so fast I could get in the bed before the lights went, before the room went dark. I was carrying 7 people on my back. That's the kind of game or the kind of performance this was. When he's got kids and his kids have kids, he's going to tell you about the day that he had 400 yards and there wasn't a damn thing that anybody could do to stop him. That's the kind of game this was. It was when I saw that stat line come across the timeline, I had to do a double take. I was like, that's a typo. He 4 bills. And it's almost one of those things where you want to say, oh, that's a bad job. That's a bad job by the defense. And then you go see some of the highlights and you see him break a tackle, stiff arm a guy, and then get to the second level. And then he has a different gear that once he gets in the clear, he's leaving. And it's like, no, that's a special kid running the ball. So kudos to him. That was an incredible performance by him. Well deserving of being the player of the week.
Very, very well deserved. And I mean, honorable mention goes to his battery mate. Didn't get the ball nearly as much, but he did damage too. Oscar Barboza had 7 carries, 137 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So
yeah, that's one of those like, really, dude. Like I'm over here, I'm averaging almost 20 yards a carry. You're gonna go ahead and get 400, and nobody gonna talk about me. Come on, man. You gotta leave me some. You could have gave me give me 50 of those. Like, come on, man. But it just kind of shows you, in all seriousness, Canoga kind of got out slow. They were, they're a little undermanned. But one of the things that I hyped up about them in coming into the season is like, this was a tough outfit last year. And they have built a reputation in recent years because they had a kid. I'm not sure where he might have went. He might have went the JUCO route, but they had a really good back last year or 2 years ago who was doing similar things. So this is kind of the Hunters' identity. They're gonna beat you up a little bit. They're gonna run the ball at you because this is who they are. And this kid has kind of emerged as the bell cow. And quite frankly, what he's done the last couple of weeks is kind of giving Corey Hall a run for his money in terms of like who's been the best player in the Valley in the first half of the year, because you put up the stat lines he's put up the last couple of weeks, what he did against Panorama. Now in this game, he's throwing his hat in the ring like, hey, you better pay attention to me too, because I'm all over the place.
Well, yeah, and if he continues playing like that, he'll turn their record around too. Because right now, it's hard. I would see why people wouldn't be paying attention because they lost the first 4 games in a row.
And also, if you're Troy Cassidy at Kennedy, you see that stat line and you're like, oh boy, okay, all right, maybe we got some problems to deal with in the Valley Mission. Maybe,
yeah, I mean, if last week's running game wasn't enough for them, that kid is definitely going to show them what's up.
Yeah, so maybe it was good that they saw Chatsworth because that's a good sort of like litmus test in terms of like, all right, we got another one of those coming real soon. So let's hold the fort because Corey Rule's coming, and we don't tackle, which can be an issue for Kennedy sometimes. Their linebackers like to come up and punch, and they'll hit you. They don't always wrap up. This kid seems like the kind of kid that if you don't wrap up, he's going to have the defensive coordinator throwing his headset down and yelling at you while you're staring at his ass and elbows running to the end zone. So, yeah. I'm hyped up. I'm sorry, guys. I'm hyped. It was a good week. We've had some. I watched two teams beat the snot out of each other on Friday night. I'm still riding that high from being at Chavez Friday night. Sorry, I apologize.
No, it was a heck of a week for action, but that's the thing. Canoga's got Rule, Chatsworth's got Ramo, Panorama's got Pacheco.
Mm-hmm.
You've got 3 hard, gritty runners in this league, and make it 4. Gore Abrahamian.
Yeah, because let me tell you something. Mention him. I don't want him in my mentions. Like, hey, bro. I didn't hear nobody talking about the gorilla. I didn't hear nobody talking about the gorilla. So I don't want him in my mentions saying, hey, I throw my name in the hat too. And Argot, we see you too. We got love for the Kennedy guys. And while I'm at it, let me mention Fuentes Gutierrez, because he'll get after me too if I don't mention him. So because he's tough. We know Kennedy's tough. We're not saying that Kennedy is not still built to win the Valley Mission. We're just saying y'all got some savages that y'all gonna have to deal with coming up. That's all we're saying.
It will not be a cakewalk.
No, not at all.
No. And I mentioned Pacheco. He's one of the other honorable mentions for this week. And we were talking about Cal. He had the ball 23 times. He went off for 175 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. And it was just give and go. 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and then you blink, and he went 15. And then you blink, and he had a big 60-yarder, like I talked about earlier. And so he was hard to contain. And that's the challenge when you've got these backs.
Yeah.
And if Rule didn't do 403 on 29 carries, one of our other honorable mentions probably would have been the player of the week. Jalen Burt from North Hollywood had another massive game. He went off for 225 yards and 3 touchdowns. And we were talking about Chatsworth needing a number 2, a legit number 2. North Hollywood has a legit number 2. And that's Ronnie Gibson. And he had another 100 yards with a touchdown.
Thunder and Lightning.
Thunder and Lightning. And they 1-2, and they're going to come at you. And, their matchups coming up on the schedule, they've got the big one that I'm kind of looking at. But before we get into that, I got one more honorable mention. Verdugo Hills righted the ship against Van Nuys, and Sebastian Herarte led the way. He had 13 carries, 98 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So there's a lot of work being done on the ground.
Mm-hmm. And let me throw this in there, because we're talking about the running backs, but I'm gonna give my boy some love. It was a rough night. It was a rough score, having to go all the way out to LA Harbor. But Corey Hall, first play out the gate, 98-yard touchdown reception. Even when they don't win, he's gonna give you something. That's because Corey Hall is gonna do some Corey Hall stuff. So I'm gonna give my boy some love, because, like I said, it was a rough week, but we still see you. We know you're still doing work out there. So I'm gonna throw him in there, just because before I could even settle in on Thursday night, I'm already seeing. I'm like, I didn't even realize the game had started, and he already found the end zone. So I'm gonna throw him in there, just because I'm gonna throw Corey Hall in there every week, because we've been talking about Corey Hall since week 0, and I'm being petty.
Every minute count.
I'm being petty.
And I've got nothing against that. I've seen him. I saw him for a half, and I walked away like, I need to see more Corey Hall.
Yep.
We've been beating the drum for him for 6 weeks now. And every week he gives us another reason to keep beating that drum.
Yeah, we see you 1-1. Oh yeah.
I will say, the only homerism we're guilty of is pumping the Valley.
The whole Valley. All of them.
All of them. I mean, all of these kids are basically in our backyard right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's 20 schools in the Valley that are city section. And, nothing against the Southern section teams, nothing against the private schools. But the schools that have not gotten any love are those 22 schools that are city section in the Valley. That's our backyard. And we'll praise you in one hand and we'll bring you down in the other. Because we're going to call it as it's happening. And there's going to be nothing but love. Nothing but love coming your way, because there's a lot of good football being played, and we're here to pump it up.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of love, if you still here with us and you still listening, please leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment. You don't think I'm talking enough about your school? You want us to pump up your kids? Leave it in the comments. I'll read them all. Just leave a like, subscribe. Tell your friends about us, because like I said, I'm out here. You'll see me standing in the end zone. I'm out here. I'm here to show love to these kids. I believe in the ball that's played in the Valley. I believe in these coaches. I believe in these institutions. I believe in these ADs, and we just want to show everybody love. That's why we out here. That's why we doing it. So, hey, leave a like, subscribe to our podcast. Check us out on social media, VST Media on Instagram, Twitter. We tweeting about these games. We sharing stats. Everything we do is to put shine on the Valley, because that's what we care about. That's what we love, and that's what we're here to do.
And free highlight reels too. You guys
reels.
Yeah, you guys can put it to yourself too, and it's all free.
Yeah, man. Listen, and that's what we out here to do. I'm out here on the sideline. You see me. You go on VST Media. Hey, we tagging you. We want you guys to put all this stuff on your huddle. We want these coaches to be able to pump you up to these college recruiters and let everybody know what y'all are doing. So, hey, if you listening, and I know some of y'all are, I know y'all listening. I know you out there, the sound of my voice. Make sure you telling your mama, make sure you tell your daddy, make sure you tell your grandma, make sure you tell your math teacher in the third period that get on your nerves. Make sure you telling the people telling you to be quiet in the cafeteria because you're making too much noise. Make sure you're telling everybody, come check us out. Come check out this podcast. Come read our stories, because we're writing about y'all too. If you see me on the sideline, I'm writing about everything you do. So if you out here pulling face masks, I'm gonna tell you about it too. But if you out here catching touchdowns, I'm gonna get it on video and I'm gonna write a story about you and tell everybody how great you are. So bottom line is, I'm clowning, but please, show us love. Because we out here, we doing the work, because we want everybody to know who these kids are. We want everybody from Chavez to Van Nuys to Sylmar to Monroe to Elko to Taft to Poly, everybody in between. We watching all of y'all. We want to show all y'all love. So please like, subscribe, tell everybody about it. Tell your mom. Make sure you tell your mom.
When they're old men in the corner, they have some proof to refer back to. Like, I'm not just making it up.
Exactly.
They wrote about it. They talked about it. It's been confirmed. It's validated.
When your kids have kids, there is going to be documented proof that somebody also saw that you were a savage when you was putting up 400 yards, Corey. I see you.
And once it's on the internet, it's there forever.
That's what I'm saying. I'm telling you, you can't believe everything you see on the internet, but when it's about you, you definitely can believe it. So make sure you following us. We love y'all. Come on, show us love.
And on that note, we love you all. That's why we do what we do. Drop the like, the subscribe, spread the word, and we'll see you next week with another roundup. But if you're watching this kind of early, stay tuned, because we're going to be dropping our mid-season roundup. That's coming. So keep your eyes and ears open. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.